tabletop takeaway. Game mechanics on display. 3 designers share the stage. Pick a genre and we'll play the tabletop takeaway.
Hi everyone, we're the Tabletop Takeaway, and we're coming to you live here from the Roseville skating arena, which is where Protospiel Twin Cities is occurring for the first time. I'm Ananda.
I'm Charlie McCarran.
And I'm Trevor Muller-Hagel.
Yeah.
Our first applause. Thank you very much, everyone.
Wow, weird.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, for those of you who are just joining us, the Tabletop Takeaway is basically a podcast where we as game designers take lessons from games that we've played. So we play games, we talk about the games, and we talk about what we've learned from the games. That's the takeaway.
And so maybe, Trevor, you could fill us in on how this podcast started?
Yeah, so actually last year in August at 2DCon, the designer area, the game design area, was a little bit slower than previous years. And so Ananda had a lot of free time and he was looking to fill it. And I'm like, hey, well, I've got some free time too. Maybe we, maybe try to design games. Maybe we try and do some stuff. Like, well, what about, I've always wanted to look at a game and break it down into its components and kind of feel like, okay, well, what do you think the designer was doing here? Why do you think that's beneficial? And so the first thing we did was like, okay, well, what do we both like? Oh, Dominion. Everyone loves Dominion. That likes deck builders. It's the father of deck building.
Yeah, I think we talked for 45 minutes.
Almost an hour.
About Dominion.
Yeah, and it was great. I was like, oh, well, this is kind of fun. Could we do something with this that's maybe a little bit more interesting, more engaging?
Yeah. And then we said, let's make a podcast and let's rope Charlie into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the guy with the audio recording gear. But no, it was
we chose wisely.
It was kind of fortuitous because I had thought it would be fun to do a podcast on game design, but I wasn't sure, it's such a visual medium that I wasn't sure if it would work in podcast form. But we just, once we started rolling, we tried to pick games that people know real well so that they can picture what's going on in the games.
At least some games.
Some games.
Yeah. Our basic format is we do sets of 4 episodes on some sort of theme, like
deck building,
or tile placement, or social deduction,
or hidden movement.
Yeah. And so we first do 3 episodes where we pick specific published games in that genre, and we talk about what sorts of things we can learn from them, what went well, and then the 4th episode is just talking about the genre more generally.
Yeah.
Maybe looking into some other games.
And so for today's episode, being that we are at Protospiel Twin Cities, we are picking games that no one knows about except us here, basically in this room. And we've played this weekend, I think, 9 games. We tried to play as many as we possibly could.
9 games together.
Together we played 9 games that we would choose
separately.
And kind of select, what could we take away from these games that we think would be valuable for other designers to kind of learn from and grow from.
Oh, I should say, for the benefit of listeners, if you're not familiar with Protospiel, basically Protospiel is an event where a bunch of designers come together and play test each other's prototypes.
And even play testers are welcome at a much reduced price. So if you like to play test games, do Protospiel.
It's the place to be.
Yeah. So, and we'll also preface, we enjoyed playing all of these games, and we had to figure out how to narrow it down to 3 target games.
This is not like an award ceremony or something.
Yeah, these are not our favorite games of the 9 we played. Yeah. We enjoyed all of them a lot. So if we played a game with you and we said, hey, we might use your game in the podcast, and we don't use it, don't feel like, oh, why didn't they use it? It's it's not an award. We just
turns out there's too many games already in the world to talk about. We'll have material for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can play more than 3 games a day and still have games to play that you can't catch up on. So.
Yeah. But I guess to start things off, the first game that we want to talk a little bit about is Deep Hunters by Aaron Myers.
Hey,
that's
he's
Aaron.
right there in the audience.
Here. Thank you for being here, Aaron.
Yeah, so not an award ceremony. So Deep Hunters is a pretty interesting deck building game.
Yeah.
Which involves thematically you're diving down and looking for treasures and trying to stay down under the water. The deeper you go, the better the stuff you find. But at some point you have to surface because you start building up fatigue.
Right.
But then when you surface, you get to spend the treasure that you've found and cash in the experience that you've gained to add more cards to your deck. Which is the basic gameplay loop. You go down to different locations in the ocean, spending movement points, which you get from cards that you play. And at those locations, there are challenges that you face. And if you successfully complete these challenges by playing cards, well, there's a variety of ways. The challenges are in different. There are different skills that they're testing you against, and you add your experience in that skill to cards that have generic points that contribute to challenges that you've played that turn. And you also get to flip a card from your deck at random to add a little bit more. And if you can beat the challenge value, then you succeed and you get a reward, which is generally treasure cards, which you add to your deck, experience cards, which you add to your deck, or even...
artifact cards?
Yeah, I think they're called fragments.
Fragments.
Which are sort of the victory condition of the game. And so you're building up all these things, and in classic deck builder fashion, they do start to clog up your deck.
Right.
And at the same time, you're also building up fatigue because you have to add in fatigue cards for various reasons, one of which is simply the passage of time. So at some point, you are going to start drawing cards that are not great for you. And at that point, you're going to want to think about going back to the surface where you can cash in all of the rewards you've accumulated for prizes to add to your deck.
So adding in a little bit of a push your luck mechanic to a deck builder, which is
Right.
a really fascinating combination.
Yes, yeah. And going back to the surface also gives you a chance to get rid of the fatigue so that you're ready to go down again, as deep as you can dive. And it's a really interesting combination. I think it does, the thing that struck me, I think it does a really good job of modeling fatigue in this sort of scenario.
And then also having the fatigue potentially cause damage, which makes it harder to remove than just fatigue. So
Right.
you can have more advanced forms of a fatigue-like system. And I thought it was really clever in the core mechanics. We didn't get to dive too much into the unique cards you can purchase or acquire, or even leveling up your character too much. I think in just the playtest, we got through one dive pretty much.
Right.
But even that had enough interesting decisions as we're able to also either cooperate or betray each other as we're completing challenges together. There's a lot of just intersecting mechanics that I thought worked really well together.
Yeah, I think the cooperative element was cool and not something you see in a deck builder. Usually it is you're doing your own thing, pretty much. You might do a card that reacts to other people or tries to attack other people, but yeah.
Well, we haven't actually, I don't think we've talked about that yet, the cooperative sort of rock, paper, scissors-esque, but not exactly system. So in this game, one of the things is you can collaborate on challenges. So when you're facing a challenge, if somebody else is on the same spot, they can also contribute to overcoming that challenge. But if you succeed at the challenge, you then have to decide, well, what's going to happen with the rewards?
Right.
And that's when there's a little mini game, which is a little bit like rock, paper, scissors, but actually quite a bit different and more like the prisoner's dilemma. Because there are 3 cards you can play, cooperate, defend, and betray. And it's sort of rock, paper, scissors in that cooperate sort of beats defend sort of beats betray, and betray sort of beats cooperate.
Right.
In terms of determining who gets rewards. Except that if you both cooperate, you both get rewards. And there are a few other nuances to it.
Yeah, the first time I've seen ties actually give you more of a benefit than actually winning an outright rock, paper, scissors, which is a cool mechanism.
Right.
For cooperate only.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you betray, you do get more rewards than if you betray someone who cooperates, you do get more rewards than if you cooperate with them, But
you also have to keep in mind that, if you're playing with Ananda and your tit-for-tat strategy of
I will always
instantly
cooperate with you unless you betray me, then it will be a random card every time.
So, that I mean,
That's just a classic strategy.
It's a good strategy
Classic.
for those
Classic
games.
rock, paper, scissors strategy.
But,
Yeah.
yep.
But it's really cool. The asymmetry to the rock, paper, scissors, and the fact that ties aren't just, oh, no one wins, that's really cool.
Yeah. And I think for listeners maybe who have played Clank, it will feel familiar in that you're using your deck to move around. And I think it's cool to see like another tangentially related to that game
Right.
in a card-only mostly format.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, on the Clank episode, we did talk about how in Clank you have to play all the cards in your hand. You're forced to, which makes discarding cards pretty interesting.
Right.
In this game, you're forced to play 3 cards from your hand.
At least 3.
At least 3. You can
At
play
least
more.
3. You can play unlimited number of cards.
Right.
Yeah.
Which has the same benefit as in Clank, where discarding cards is suddenly really interesting because it's a way to get rid of, say, fatigue cards that you don't want to play. You can just discard them.
Or damage cards, which we
Right.
never really got into too much.
Right, yeah. But you still have the flexibility of deciding which cards. It's kind
Right.
of a nice middle ground between you have to play all the cards like Clank does, and you can play whatever cards you want, which is what Dominion does.
Well, and it has kind of a weaning down, too, where you discard 3, or you play 3, draw 2. So your
Yes.
hand is constantly shrinking as well, which makes you really feel like you're progressing and you're getting more tired. You're getting fatigue cards.
Yes.
So those are coming up in your hand as well. So if you only draw 2 cards now and you have 2 fatigue, it's like, I don't know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That further contributes to the atmosphere of you're underwater. You know, you're running out of oxygen. You're
Panicking a little bit.
panicking a little bit. You want to
Yeah.
get to the surface. So all of those mechanics, the fatigue and the dwindling hand size, really do help support the theme there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I think for me, my takeaway, there's a lot of cool mechanics going on. So I had a little trouble picking one, but I thought it was cool that when you go back to the surface with your deck, you can actually like take your entire deck and find all your treasures that you found and use all those, sift them out from your deck.
Oh, yeah.
So though they're clogging your deck while you're going on the expedition, they come out, and also you can level up by using your experience cards. So those get pulled out of the deck. And you can rest by getting the fatigue out. So
Yeah.
I like that idea. It felt so powerful from breaking out of the normal deck builder. You're never going to be able to just like look at your entire deck and pull things out of it. So
I mean, it's kind of like what you do at the end of a game of Dominion, right? Like separating out your deck and seeing what you had, but you get to do it in the
Each
middle.
one's
in the
a
middle of the
mini-game.
game.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
fun. That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we had talked with Aaron. Well, actually, yeah. Takeaways, other takeaways.
yeah.
I think my big takeaway is just the value of giving players sort of a defined separate place where of safety compared to danger. So like
The campfire. Yeah.
right, yeah. I mentioned this when we were giving feedback to Aaron, but it reminds me a little bit of Slay the Spire, and how in Slay the Spire you go between different monsters. And, you know, it's all tense and you're worried about dying. And then you get to a campfire and you can rest, or you can, you know, repair or upgrade your gear.
Or cycle your deck, or like
Yeah.
burn cards.
Yeah, and just having like having a separation between the danger and the safety, and giving players a place to feel safe in the middle of this sort of game where there are threats. It's really nice. It gives players a chance to relax. And like from the perspective of a narrative arc, that's sort of like, you know, where the tension goes down, which allows you to build up tension again.
Right, right. So for my takeaway, it's really finding that kind of similarity with Clank, like we were mentioning, how the deeper you go in Clank, the riskier it is because you might get attacked by a dragon, or you might, you know, get hurt and die down there, and you won't actually get your treasure because you actually never got out. So there's a risk there. But this, you feel like you're going through these different layers, because I think there's 4 layers of the water that you're diving into, and each one feels like it's a big move because it has more movement to just dive down that one more step, and more movement, and it creates this just like, okay, that's going to take all of my movement just to move down one, and it feels so heavy versus Clank, where it's like, okay, well, I just moved one and I'm deeper now. It's like, okay, that's fine. But this is like you actually feel that weight.
It's like the pressure of the water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is a really cool, just being able to tie that thematically into the mechanics. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like that.
Yeah. Great game, Aaron.
Yeah.
And-
Well done.
Thank
Well
you,
done.
Aaron.
Yeah. We'll. Yeah.
Yeah,
for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Thanks. Next up, we are going to talk about Joe Kell's game, Don't Get Duped.
Don't get duped.
Yeah, we can. Yeah.
He did call for that applause, just so we're all clear. He did call for that applause.
So,
We're not going to sing the song again, though, between episodes, just
Yep.
so we're clear.
so I wanted to talk about this game because I'm always drawn to games that have fairly simple rules, but there's like a lot of fun social interactions happening there. And I'll try to describe it as best I can here. So imagine you're at the table with 2 cards in your hand that are number cards, colors. Some have polka dots, some are different patterns and stuff. And then between you and the players on your left and right are 2 more cards that are only seen by you and the players immediately next to you.
Right.
And so on down all the way around the table. Everyone has these 2 cards in their hands. And then there's 2 cards out on the table that are public. And what we're doing is you're making the best hand you can out of all the cards you can see.
Yeah.
Well, not making the best hand you can, but that's the whole part about don't get duped. So you have this hand of cards, and you're going to tell the people at the table, well, I have, the best run out of anybody, or
The most cards.
the most green cards,
Right,
or
most striped cards.
Yeah.
Most polka dots
Yeah.
on my cards.
Yeah.
Or fewest.
The physical
Fewest
polka dots.
physical
Polka
dots
dots.
on
Yes.
my card.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to define what you mean.
Yeah.
Right.
But players can ask clarifying questions.
And we soon, it took us a little bit to learn
Right.
how to play this out, but you are trying to you're trying to dupe the other players into either they will vote on whether they think your thing is completely true, completely false, maybe true, or maybe false.
Right.
And then you get a payout if you trick them.
Yeah, like if you said something that was false, then anyone who said, "Oh, that's completely true," is going to pay you 3 points, which is a lot in this context.
Right.
But if they said, "Oh, I think that's maybe true," then they pay you 1 point. And if they said, "Oh, that's maybe false," or "that's completely false," then they get points. You don't lose points, but they get points.
Yeah. And so everyone does this at the same time with the cards they're looking at, writes it down, and then, reveal, and we go around the table and see who you can fool.
My favorite here is that you could actually dupe yourself. And I actually did have the highest. I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
And that happened, I think, 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. It's really fun, sort of betting on your own hand in that way.
Right,
Because,
right.
you only see half of the table if you're in a 2-3 player game or so.
Yeah.
Or 4. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting because often in this kind of thing you are trying to make the best hand you can, but this is not a game about doing that. This is a game into tricking people to believe that your hand is better in some way than
Or
it
worse.
actually is, or worse.
Yeah.
And so Ananda was sitting to my left, and so I knew that I really needed to trick him because he was going to set the tone for everyone else at the table. So I tried to make it look like, he and I were sharing information. So
Yeah.
I tried to make him think I
You
have
gotta
a great run in my hand.
Yeah.
And I really didn't.
Because you go in clockwise order. So when you make a statement, then the person to your left is the first person who gets to decide, "Oh, I think that's true," or "I think that's false," which can strongly influence everyone else.
Because they can see 2 of their cards.
Right, they
that
know
no
2
one
of-
else can see.
Right, they know
Yeah.
2 of your cards.
Yeah.
because
So
you're
everyone
sharing
has
them.
partial information, and you're trying to glean it all from each other as you go around.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Yeah, the most important person to dupe is your neighbor to the left.
Yeah. And what I think my takeaway from it is the creativity that came out of deciding what you're going to claim, because you really could claim there's restrictions. You can't just
You can't negate something.
Yeah.
You can't say, I don't have the most.
Right.
And you can't make a... And I think the rule book had a statement like, yeah, I will eat the most spaghetti. That's not valid. It has to do with the cards.
Yep. And as we were playing, we were like, well, should this be restricted or this be restricted? But I think Joe's instinct to try to keep it open as possible is a good one because, it just felt fun to figure out, like, what is the thing I could claim about my hand that will...
Right.
Even, like, it almost gets into sort of like a party game aspect to make people laugh about, like, now we're going to have to count all these polka dots. Thanks a bunch, Joe, for making that as your claim.
Yeah. It's so I guess my takeaway, and something I found really interesting about this is a lot of games with some element of hidden information. They're about figuring out what's hidden, right? And to some extent that's the case here too. But in this game, a big part of it is using information against other people. You're using what they know to trick them because you and the player, you and your neighbors both know, I should say your neighbors know 2 of the cards that you have. And when you're trying to figure out what to claim, a big part of your decision is, what can my neighbors see? What information do they have? And how can I use that to make them believe something that isn't actually the case? And I don't think I've encountered that before, but a big part of the game really is about taking what people know and using that information against them, which I think is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then it sort of becomes a double bluff because they know that you know this information.
Yeah.
So
it
becomes about reading the other person too.
Yeah. Like, okay, I know this, but do I know that you know that I know this?
Yeah.
But
okay. Yeah.
I think there's definitely space for other games that
that's a good point.
That encourage you to use people's information against them.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to continue with my takeaway, then, it's gonna kind of call back to our logical induction deduction series because there's something about fuzzy rules in this one that reminded me of what we were talking about back then, and this, I think, has probably the best fuzzy rules with what's on those cards. And you're trying to, like, okay, what can I use to actually trip people up? Joe mentioned that some folks try to do cribbage hand. Who has the best cribbage hand? It's like, oh, God, cribbage hand. And so you're trying to figure that out now. How does that work into what we have out here? And you have 8 cards at your disposal, so you have a lot of flexibility. It can be poker hands. It can be whatever you can glean from the outside world, but you have to be able to define it to the other players. So... cribbage could be hard because obviously not everyone plays cribbage, so they may not intrinsically know, like, okay, yeah, these are this or that. But being able to have that kind of fuzzy rule, like, it's not the number, it's not necessarily the shading, it's not necessarily any of these elements. You can think outside the box as long as it pertains to the cards. So, like, okay, I have the most of today's date. What? That okay, I guess you can do that, but then it throws people a little bit for a loop and it kind of catches them off guard. So you can actually use that as a tactic in the game, which I think being able to use fuzzy rules as a tactic is a cool idea. So, yeah. That's my takeaway, is being able to use fuzzy as a tactic.
Yeah. Any last thoughts or?
No, I mean it's a cool idea.
Yeah.
And it plays pretty quick.
Yeah.
Which is great, especially for that kind of party family level game. Yeah.
Best of luck to you, Joe.
Yeah. Best of luck, Joe.
Yeah. Nice.
All right, so our final episode, which is unfortunate because he was in here for a moment to listen to us sing, and then he went back to keep playtesting, is Scott Eaton's game, Super Galactic Battle Mounties, which is roughly based off of the Power Rangers style things, but is very much IP adjacent, and it has nothing to do with the Power Rangers, in case anyone is listening to this from Power Rangers, has nothing to do with Power Rangers. But they're battle mounties, and they have colors, and they're light, and it's great.
Also, they get into mechs and transform.
And they get into mechs, and they can have weapons that can stack on top of each other to be more powerful, and you have the power of friendship, which is always great. Okay, so just to actually talk about this a little bit, You are the guardians of Montreal, the futuristic city of Montreal, and you are trying to protect it from different like invaders or evil beings that are trying to take over the world. And it all starts with Montreal, obviously. The minions of these monsters are called asteroids, and they are popping up all over the place using kind of dice-generated mechanics. I won't go into too much detail because it would take too long to explain the whole thing. But basically, you are working with your fellow Mounties to go around and destroy the asteroids and destroy the big mech lumbering character who is tearing up the city. We only played the intro version, only the introduction campaign, or what's the actual word? Scenario.
Yeah.
And I thought it did some really clever things. Obviously, you have your standard like movement and stuff, and you have like you're fighting off little cubes of bad guys. Like, okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And they're spawning constantly in random locations. But what really struck me about this game was the cooperative element. So everyone has dice that are your colors. You have 2 of them. And it's perfectly done with color theory involved. So you have the rainbow. And it's of 6 colors, not 7, just to not make anyone angry. And so all 6 colors perfectly fit on a dice, and there are 6 Mounties, that all represent each different color. And so as you're going through, if you roll a die and you're in a place by yourself fighting these dudes, if you roll your color, you deal 1 damage. It's like, okay, well, that's really hard. It's 1 in 6. That's tough. You're not dealing a lot of damage. But then, as more of your allies come and join you, you each get to bank off of each other. So it's like, okay, if red and yellow are together, then they both hit on red and yellow, so they're able to do more and more damage. And so the more friends that are coming together, the more they do.
Yeah, the power of friendship.
The power of friendship. Mm-hmm. And then he also has things like going plaid, which is great. I won't get too into the nitty-gritty of those. But the other key element that we talked about is having the upgradable weapons and little robots that you can inhabit. So everyone can fight the little asteroids running around, but only the robots can actually fight the big monster that's terrorizing the city. So you actually have to create these robots by finding these tokens that randomly generate on the map, and then you unlock your monster or your robot, and then that actually also gives you an extra benefit of being able to use your special ability whenever you want instead of spending a resource for it. So you get like all these little benefits as you're going around fighting these things. You're starting to get overwhelmed. But yeah, it just had such a cool feel to it to me that you're really using that cooperative element. And he really ingrained that in the core mechanics, which I thought was really well done.
Yeah, the whole power of friendship dice thing is kind of like you almost get exponentially stronger the more of you are in the same place.
Right.
But the asteroids are all spread out, and so you do have to split up to some extent to go fight them. So there's a big tension there because you're very weak by yourself, but you might need to be.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. Something else has to happen somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was funny realizing, like, well, there's 6 of us playing. If we all 6 go to a location, every single die we roll is a hit.
Is a hit, yep.
But even within that, there was, like, reasons to roll certain types of dice. So when you start to combine your mechs and stuff.
Yeah, you gain new abilities that are unlocked by rolling certain colors on the dice. When you, you can get into mechs, and then the mechs can combine into a bigger mech, and then the bigger mech has additional abilities when you roll certain colors.
Yeah.
Just pretty fun.
And I think my takeaway from it is that power of combining. Like, really, like, there's a lot of co-op games where it's helpful to be in the same spots. But, yeah, that power of, like, ooh, I put my card with your card, and they actually match up visually. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, so Charlie and I actually had compatible weapons that could stack together. And if we rolled those 2 colors at the same roll, then it would allow us to actually increase the effectiveness and do extra damage with those things. Like, oh, great, we work really well together now. But then even other people could use their dice on our weapons if they were with us. So it's like, oh, yeah, let's get this going and get this ramped up. So, like, yeah, you felt pretty good. But then all of a sudden, a far-off sector that's uninhabited has 30 guys on it, and it's going to crash if you don't send someone over there and deal with it or move things around. Or, yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think my takeaway is one interesting thing about this game is that obviously, you're fighting these aliens, but the aliens can't actually do any damage to you. The Mounties are invincible. They don't even have hit points. They can't be hurt.
Or stunned or anything, really.
Yes. The things that are at risk are not the Mounties, but the city itself, which can't move, can't really defend itself. It's just there to take damage, which is nice because you don't have to worry about like a player being hurt or killed, which can be not very much fun for a player who's eliminated. And I think the lesson there is like if you have a game about fighting, the characters who are doing the fighting don't need to be able to die necessarily.
Yeah.
Which is, you see that in some other, like for example, if you've played Into the Breach, the computer game. Well, okay, you can actually take damage in Into the Breach, but it's more about defending the helpless cities.
City. Yeah.
And I think that's a really effective victory condition, like having a sort of NPC party or a civilian party that you're trying to defend, as opposed to just trying to survive yourself and beat the enemy, because it means that players can always fight at their full strength without having to worry about protecting themselves. They have something else they need to protect.
Right.
It's probably good. Actually, this reminds me of our co-op series too, because we were talking about how like a lot of IP games have to have the hero like have 1 million hit points because they're the hero. You don't want to lose that hero, but it's like maybe it's better to just think about like
make him invincible.
They're just invincible.
Yeah, and just have some civilians that you have to protect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was actually going to riff off of the co-op from our previous episodes as well. As my takeaway, he did a great job of looking at that cooperative narrative and kind of creating this big central puzzle, but then you also have your puzzle where you have an ability, you have unlockables, and you're kind of figuring out your own little thing, but really the big pit puzzle in the middle is what matters. And then you can also create little side puzzles with your comrades, with your other Mounties. And so you're able to kind of adjust everything and really get that kind of cooperative nature from just the core mechanics, which is, I think, a really good thing. It's not like called on from a card or called on from something else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, congrats, Scott.
Congrats, Scott, who is currently playtesting.
Again,
good job.
Not an award ceremony.
Like a good game designer.
Playtesting
constantly. Yep. So we have about 20 minutes left. Maybe we could open it up a little bit to either questions about the podcast or games, or maybe we want to have people, if you have a takeaway from something you played and could explain it in a short amount of time, maybe like a mechanic you saw or something you'd want to give a shout out to.
Yeah, who has a takeaway they want to talk about?
This is your chance to be on the podcast.
We
if
could
you really want
invite
to
you
be
up
on.
to the fourth chair here.
I'm a little bummed Peter walked away because I think he really wanted to be on the podcast.
Oh yeah, well,
silly guy. He's gonna regret it when he hears this.
I could share a takeaway from.
Yeah, Aaron, come on up.
Yeah, come on up.
So speaking of Peter, I played his game, Cathedrals of Commerce, yesterday, and the thing that struck me about that game, it's a competitive game, sort of a Euro game, worker placement and resource management, and takes place at late 1800s Chicago. The players are building up downtown, kind of trying to build tall skyscrapers. And the way the components of the game showed up on the board, and you see the buildings being placed, and then bigger buildings being placed, and then each player's skyscraper being built up over the course of multiple rounds.
Yeah, where you visibly see it.
Yeah, it was just a really satisfying, like, visual component to it.
Yeah.
It's a competitive game, but it almost felt cooperative in that sense, that you were kind of working together to build the city. Even though one player would win, there was still that kind of element to it that was really satisfying. That
when
visual.
You get to the end, and you see like these are the skyscrapers we built and all the buildings we built. Yeah,
Yep.
it's a cool feel. I also have tested this game a couple times, so that's why I know a little bit what he's talking about.
Yeah, that was a fun one.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Aaron. Oh, hey, Scott. We talked about your game, and you missed it. That's okay. Do you have any takeaways you'd like to talk about from Protospiel? We just announced that to the whole group, but you just came in, so we just want to extend the invitation.
If anyone has a short, can explain a mechanic or something that they thought was really cool that they want to chat about.
Also, if someone has a question for us, that's also...
Yes.
That's also
Feel
allowed.
free to ask us a question. Happy to answer it. Or if you have any Protospiel-specific advice that you think would be good for designers to know, I think we can take that as well, because it kind of...
This is the Protospiel episode.
This is the Protospiel episode, so we can definitely mix and match.
Yeah, Trevor, come on up.
Yeah, Trevor. Sit next to Trevor.
Trevor and Trevor.
All right. So
Trevor,
this is Trevor. This is Trevor.
In a way, Trevor is responsible for this podcast.
That is
because
true.
he ran 2D Con where the idea was formed. Well,
Yes.
we were just sitting.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you,
I
Trevor.
can take a lot of
Kirchner.
credit for making you have time. The question I had for the podcast is, what do you have a takeaway about Protospiel and like attending playtesting events that you could maybe share of like how do you get the most out of an event like this?
I'll start because I was thinking about this in the car ride actually today because I was realizing like I don't think I've attempted to play so many different people's games. Usually it's like I have 4 or 5 games I'm trying to test the weekend, so I'm getting like half my game, half of other people's games. This time we were like, we'll play as many as we possibly can.
We're on a mission.
Yeah.
And it's such good practice because you find, like, thinking about another person's problem and how you would solve it is instantly, like, a way to teach yourself about
And
how
to see how they solved other problems in their own design.
Exactly.
Right.
So you're actually, like, when you playtest someone else's work, you're actually helping yourself and them, which I think is a really good thing to realize with playtesting.
Yeah, I mean, we were specifically looking for takeaways that we could talk about. So we
Right.
were like thinking about, okay, what can I learn from this design? Which I think is a good mindset to go into this with.
Yeah, and I think I've honestly not been good about that in the past. I'm always like, oh, what can I do with my design from Protospiel? Instead of like, oh, I need to play as many games as I can to get as much experience as I can and glean what I can from these other designers who all have different perspectives and different information and different ways of solving problems. And then they'll help you too because you helped them. And so it's a really nice back and forth. Always highly recommend playtesting events with other designers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to get playtesting events for just your game. I don't know if anyone's tried that. I've seen it in the wild a bit where people will have like a game day at like the Source or something, and they get like 2 or 3 people to come. It's like, yeah, you need like designers and a lot of people. And so Protospiel is a great way to do that. I think we had 160 people. I don't know. Eric's not in here. But we had a lot of people come to this event, and it's brand new this year. And so like you can have so many minds look at your game, and it's just going to help it so much.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess to your question, I would say best way to get what you can out of Protospiel is like go and play people's games with the mindset of what can I learn from this that I can apply to my own designs.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Trevor.
Thanks, Trevor.
Oh, we got
Yeah,
Scott
Luke.
coming
Oh,
up.
all right.
Crash the party and talk on podcast.
There you go.
This is fun.
So-
We haven't had guests on the podcast.
Yeah.
We usually just sit in my house.
We
and-
should make sure we get everyone's name.
Oh, yeah.
One of the things that I have learned this year, or tried and to put into practice this time, is Protospiel is about helping each other make games. It's not about selling a game, and it's not about finishing a game. And so this year at Protospiel, I have only finished 2 of the games that I've played, including my own. Because everyone here is a designer, everyone has the ability to extrapolate what's going to happen on turn 4 if they played turns 1 through 3. And so I have been offering players an out on my own games of saying, hey, we're going to play 1 or 2 more turns and then we can give feedback, and if you want to jump to something else, you can. And I've been doing that with other designers too, of just kind of saying, hey, I'm ready to give feedback. Is there something new that you want me to see in the next couple of turns, or are we ready for feedback now? And it's helped because, you get to Protospiel and it's like, hi, my 20-minute game just took 80 minutes. It happens to everyone, right? And so offering that out to players, but also offering that out to designers has helped really facilitate the feedback and make sure that more people are getting their games to the table.
Great advice.
Yeah,
Thank you, Scott.
absolutely.
Thanks, Scott.
Yeah. Yeah, we had, I think Luke.
Luke.
Come on up.
Yeah.
We'll get you on the mic. Yeah, if you want to say your name too, for the podcast.
Oh, he's the first one.
Yeah.
You said my name or my game?
Your
Your
name.
name.
Your
Name.
name.
Yeah, so I am Luke, Luke Ballahorn, and my question, it's a little off topic for the other ones, but I think one common issue that creatives run into is you have more ideas than you have time to develop ideas.
I don't want to talk about it. Okay, keep going.
What are a couple of criteria that you use to figure out what ideas to pursue out of all of the ones you could pursue?
Great question. And also, I'll say, Luke, I enjoyed your game as well.
you.
Yes,
we didn't get
yeah.
to talk about it on the show.
We also
but,
did want to talk about that. It was
Yeah.
in my top running, but
Yeah.
that's fine.
But so I don't know. Anybody want to start it off?
I mean, I guess somewhat recently, the criterion I've been moving more and more towards is, is this game something that that's going to grab people by seeing it? Because you can have you have it on the table and someone walks past, are they going to want to play it? Because there are a lot of games out there, and you can have a brilliant designed game that looks that doesn't seem that appealing from the cover, and people may not play it. Whereas if you have a game that people want to play just by seeing it, then they will play it and give it a try, right? So I guess I'm moving. I am now moving more in the direction of things with like a strong table presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked about this a bit too, because I was like, well, even my games that have awesome art, when you take them to a convention, they're still flat on the table. It's a very different feel than like you've made a couple games in Ananda that have really awesome moving
3D
pieces and
components
3D
and, yeah.
printed things that just like instantly catches the eyes of publishers. So yeah.
So my perspective may be a bit more, I guess, toward the commercial end.
Sure.
Maybe. But I guess that's the criterion I'm moving towards.
So I'm gonna move in an opposite direction really quick, just because it's tough because we all get all of these ideas, right? We all want to like pursue every idea as far as we can, but we obviously do not have the bandwidth to do that. And for me, I need to kind of follow the lightning strikes, right? And obviously, you can't just do that. You have to put in the work too. But if you have a game that is exciting you and other people are excited to see where it goes, and it's kind of fitting like, okay, and there's a place for this in the market. Okay, great. But always give a game a chance, I'd say. So if it's not too crazy to prototype, unless it's like 500 cards, maybe do a dialed back version. But if you can just get it to the table with some other people, see what they think, see if they can riff on it, then you can actually get a feel for like, is this something worth pursuing? And so if you're getting it from the idea stage to the prototype stage, definitely wean that down a little bit and see like what excites you the most, and then get a prototype of that and then put it in front of people and see what they get excited about. That's how I would do it.
Yeah. And I'll say also, like, I've had lots and lots of game ideas, and the percentage that I finished is pretty low because eventually, like, I got tired of it after the second play test, maybe put it on the shelf. But what I started to do is I used to call it like my game graveyard, which is a Google Doc where I put like a memorable mechanic from that game, and then I stored it away for later. And maybe I'll come back to it in the future. But yeah, it's okay to let a game go. I know some people spend their entire time on one game and polish it forever, which is also cool. But just my brain wants to keep working on new stuff. So
Yeah,
I now have a spreadsheet with every line of the spreadsheet a different game, and I drag them up to the top when I'm like, oh, there's something I want to work on in this game, and I put a little note, and then I do that thing, and then they filter down again.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I have so many abandoned games that I try. I play tested once, and then I decided nope, and then I shelved them.
Yeah.
I've got a spreadsheet with all of those too.
But you sent me your spreadsheet to see if there's anything that sparked my
Oh, that's
ideas.
fun.
So maybe we'll
you
send send things back. Yeah.
I also want to put an emphasis on what is your goal with game design. If you don't have a clearly defined goal with what you're doing with game design, definitely look into that a little bit too. Because if you're just doing this for fun, pursue whatever your heart desires, right? Just chase after things until you're red in the face. It doesn't really matter because you're just doing this for the design experience. But if you are trying to get published in things, that's going to be a very different track. And so you'll want to work on that in different ways. You'll want to have things a little bit more refined, play tested more thoroughly. It's going to be a little bit more of a road. But if you're just having fun, have fun. Yeah.
Thanks for the good
Thanks,
question, Luke.
Yeah.
Turns out we had a lot to say about that one.
A lot to say.
This is fun. It's like we're getting interviewed on our own podcast. So, okay. Who was first?
We got
I don't
Joe
know.
and
Joe,
Dan.
maybe? Yeah, come on up. Come on up.
Great. I will shift this towards you once you sit.
I'll sit. I'm Joe Kell, and this is to piggyback on one of the earlier things. What's your takeaway for Protospiels and getting the most of them? And I definitely agree, play test as many as you can, get your games play tested, but also take the time to ask the person their name and maybe find out a thing about them, make friends at it.
We should get to know people.
And I've been doing the Twin Cities design days that you run, and I recognize so many more people at this Protospiel just because I've seen them at the source over the last year and a half.
Yeah.
And so we have that built-in connection already, and that makes a difference. Or when you're playing someone's game that you played a year ago, and you can look at it with a different perspective. So make friends and talk to them because they're also people.
Totally.
Awesome.
Great advice.
Thank you very much for that,
Thanks, Joe. And that expands out to every game convention, especially
absolutely.
Gen Con is the biggest in the U.S. and can be very overwhelming if you don't know anybody. And so we have now our local Minnesota crew that can, hey, how's it going over here? So, yeah. Yeah, Dan, come on up.
Yeah. We got plenty of time. We're not on
We
a time
got
limit.
plenty of 7 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, this is maybe a quick one. I'm Dan Weaver. My question for you is, what is the most impactful feedback that you've ever received on a game that sort of had a big impact on the design of your game? Sort of asking, what is an example of good feedback that makes a big difference in your game?
Ooh, good question. I'll say sometimes, especially when I was starting out, sometimes I didn't listen to the feedback until a month later when I was like, wait, someone had that idea already, and it came in back later. So I think I'm better about listening to every piece of feedback, whether or not, there's the saying playtesters know when there's something wrong, but they don't know how to fix it.
Right.
So, but that's why I do love testing with game designers, because I love, especially at the early stages of a design, getting that great brainstorm ideas.
Absolutely.
So I didn't actually answer your question.
That was
a
very,
specific one.
very
So
good at
hard.
evading the question.
Yeah.
Do you have one, Ananda?
It's difficult off the top of my head to think of a specific piece of feedback.
One.
Joe says he has one.
Joe has one.
Joe,
Joe, do you
Okay,
want to
get
come
back
up
up
here?
here.
Do you want to go on Ananda's mic? Okay.
Okay, let's hear.
How long is
Here,
it?
All right, Joe's going to use my mic.
My favorite feedback to get from someone is, I felt bad when this happened, or I felt good when this happened. I can't actually tell how the people are feeling when they're playing, unless they jump up and shout or something.
Yeah.
That's the most important feedback to me, so that I know what part of the game to absolutely keep. This is the core of the game, or maybe this part's on thin ice if that person's in the target market.
Great thought, because like a lot of times different gamers have different ways they're expressing themselves too. So I would always, like, early on, I'd be like sweating, like, these people seem like they're really not having fun. And then at the end of the test, they're like, oh, that was cool. And like, they're just so locked in.
Because they have resting thinking face.
Yeah.
And that really changes someone's, like, oh, that's just what you're thinking about.
Yep.
You're not actually mad at it.
Yeah.
That's just your face. Okay, great. Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
That's a really good point. Just talking about your feelings is some of the most helpful feedback.
Just in general, too, not just with game design.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honest feedback of just like, hey, I don't think this game really works. Like, this isn't fun. Sometimes that's really hard for a playtester to say, but it's really helpful as a designer to get that, because then you're like, okay, back to the drawing board. And then you maybe come up with a really much better second iteration.
I don't remember the exact words. I've come up with one, but mostly because he's about 4 rows away from me right now. And Scott Eaton, who has already spoken here, did give me a piece of advice for one of my games where I and maybe he remembers, but that doesn't matter. With my game Color Match Pro, which, great name, I know, thank you. I was making it complicated in weird ways, and he stripped it all down to its core, and then I could actually redesign it again. I lost kind of my motivation with the game. I didn't know what to do with it because it just kind of was stagnant. And then he played it and just immediately stripped away all of the excess garbage that I didn't realize was garbage. And so, like, that was huge for me. Thanks, Scott.
Right. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, Dan.
We got time for one more? No, we're out of time.
Yep, we're out of time.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you all so much for being here. And,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I want to get a group photo while we're... Yep, but let's get everybody in.
Oh, my God. Can we get everyone in? Good job, Devin. You're doing great.
Anyone who wants to be...
There's my face.
There we go. Sweet. And this is all on the episode. We're going to have this episode posted soonish.
Yeah.
So
it's not going to go in the
listen-
regular lineup, I don't think. Is it?
Yeah, it will.
Oh, it will.
I
Yeah,
think
we
it
need
will.
we need
The
the
regular
content. That's
we need
right.
we need the content.
That doesn't mean we interrupt the current series.
Oh no.
Yeah, we were not going to interrupt
No.
the current series.
Current series is storytelling.
Yeah, which we just did Wing It. So if you haven't heard that one yet,
Yeah.
Wing It's just up there.
So yeah, thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much, everyone. And now we have nothing left to say, so you can go, you can stand.
Outro music. Wait.
Oh, outro music.
Yeah.
Ananda, you need to do the announcement. Do you remember it? No, I'm kidding.
The tabletop
takeaway, game mechanics on display. 3 designers share the stage. Pick a genre and we'll play the tabletop takeaway.
Oh yeah, you. Trevor, you didn't do your whistling.
I didn't do the whistling. No, I wasn't going to be able to focus on whistling.
Hey, thanks for listening to The Tabletop Takeaway. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. So please tell your friends and visit our website at thetabletoptakeaway.com, where you can suggest games and mechanics for us to cover next on the show.